November 12th, 2019, just outside Amarillo, Texas. By 3:40 in the afternoon, the machine had already sunk past its axles. From a moment it didn't even look stuck. It looked anchored. Like the earth itself had decided it wasn't letting go. The $2 million drilling rig sat crooked in a pool of thick clay mud, its massive tires buried deep, the weight of steel pressing it further down with every failed attempt to move it. Engines roared. Chains snapped tight. A crane worth more than most farms in the county had already tried to pull it free. It didn't budge, not an inch. Men stood around it, boots caked in red clay radios, buzzing voices getting sharper with every passing minute. Because this wasn't just a machine stuck in the ground. It was money, thousands of dollars, lost every hour. And then an old tractor rolled in, slow, uneven, paint faded to a dull, tired red. Rust creeping along the edges like it had been left behind by time itself. It didn't belong in a place like this. Not next to machines with digital panels, hydraulic systems, and engines that sounded like controlled explosions. And driving it was Eli Carter. He didn't announce himself, didn't hurry, didn't even look at the rig. He just stopped a few yards away and stepped down. And that was the moment someone laughed. Because compared to what had already failed, this looked like a joke. But there was something about the way Eli stood there that didn't match the situation. Because he wasn't looking at the machine. He was looking at this ground beneath it. And that was the first thing Hope noticed. But not the most important. Because what Eli Carter understood about that mud was something none of those engineers had even considered. And I need to take you back a few minutes. Because the moment he arrived wasn't quiet. It wasn't respectful. It was loud. And it was brutal. Hey, what is this? Someone called out. Heads turned. A few workers stepped aside, grinning. Y'all called a museum piece. Laughter spread fast. Not cruel at first. Just casual. The kind that comes easy when people feel certain. Eli didn't react. He just walked forward, boots sinking slightly into the same mud that had swallowed the rig. A younger man stepped in front of him. Clean shirt. Company logo stitched across the chest. Confidence written all over his face. Ryan Blake. Lead engineer on the site. The one who had already signed off on 3 failed recovery attempts. You lost, old man, Ryan said. Ted smiling just enough for the others to see. More laughter. Eli shook his head slightly. Number, that was all. Ryan glanced back at the tractor, then at the rig, then back at Eli. You planning to tow that out with this? He asked. A few whistles. Someone muttered. This I gotta see. Eli didn't answer. So right away, he walked past Ryan, not ignoring him, just not engaging. And that made the laughter sharper, because silence in a place like that feels like weakness. Ryan turned, raising his voice now. Listen, we've got a crane rated at 50 tons that couldn't move it, he said. You really think that thing's gonna do anything? Eli stopped, looked at the rig for a moment, then said quietly, it might. The crowd broke again, louder this time. Not because the joke was better, but because now it felt confirmed. Man, this ain't a farm job, someone shouted. This is real equipment, another voice. You'll bury that tractor too. Phones came out, cameras pointed. Because this wasn't just failure anymore. This was entertainment. Ryan stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound controlled. You're wasting time, he said. We've got a schedule. We don't need. Eli interrupted him. Not loudly, not aggressively. Just enough. You already lost time. That stopped him. Just for a second. Because the tone had changed. Not confrontational. Not defensive. Just certain. Ryan let out a short laugh, shaking his head. All right, he said. Stepping back. You want to try? Go ahead. He turned to the others. Let's give him a show. More laughter. But now, there was something else mixed in. Curiosity. Because deep down, even they wanted to see it. Not succeed. Just happen. Eli didn't move to the tractor yet. He walked around the rig, slowly, carefully, looking down more than up, studying the mud, the way it held, the way it shifted under his weight. And I need to stop here for a moment, because what he was doing right then was the only reason any of this was about to work. But nobody there understood it. Not Ryan, Not the operators. Not the men who had already tried everything they knew. Because they were all looking at the wrong problem. They saw a machine. That needed more force. Eli saw something else entirely. And that difference didn't start that day. It started a long time ago. Eli Carter was born in 1962 on a patch of land just east of Amarillo, where the soil turned to clay the moment it held water. Not rich land. Not easy land. The kind that punished mistakes and remembered them. His father, Samuel Carter, didn't run big equipment, didn't believe in it. He worked with what he had and what he understood. There's two things holding a machine down, Samuel used to say. Weight and what it's sitting in. Most men focused on the first. Samuel never did. Eli grew up watching him pull things out that shouldn't have moved. Old trucks buried after storms, plows stuck deep in wet fields, even once. A grain trailer that had sunk so far, people said it would need to be dismantled. Samuel didn't use bigger machines. He used better judgment. He'd walk the ground first, always. Kick the soil, dig into it with his hands. Wait, watch. Don't fight the ground, he told Eli once when he was barely old enough to drive. Make it let go. Eli didn't understand that at first, because it sounded like nothing, like there was no technique to it, no formula. But over time, he started to see it. The way wet clay held suction. The way weight compressed it into something closer to glue than dirt. The way pulling too hard too fast only made it worse. And the tractor, that old machine sitting a few yards behind him, was part of that lesson too. It wasn't powerful in the way modern machines were. It didn't surge, didn't snap forward. It held. It applied force slowly, evenly. The kind of force that didn't break traction, but built it. Samuel had modified it over years, not to be stronger, but to be steadier. Lower gearing, weight balanced across the frame, torque that came in low and stayed there. Eli learned to feel it, not just drive it, but understand how it responded to resistance, how it told you when you were about to lose control and when you still had it. By the time Samuel passed, Eli didn't inherit instructions. He inherited instinct. And that was the part nobody at that site could see, because standing there in that mud, they saw an old man with an old machine. What they didn't see was 40 years of knowing exactly when not to pull. And that was about to change everything. By the time Eli finished walking the perimeter of the rig, the sun had dipped just low enough to change the color of the mud. It looked thicker now, darker, heavier, and that mattered, because while everyone else had been watching the machine, Eli had been watching how the ground held it. Ryan crossed his arms, glancing at his watch. "You done studying dirt," he said loud enough for the others to hear. A few chuckles followed, not as loud as before, but still there, because to them, nothing had changed. The rig was still stuck, the tractor was still small, and Eli still looked like a man who had no business being there. Eli didn't respond. He stepped toward the front of the rig, crouched slightly, pressing his boot into the mud near the front tire. It sank, slow, sticky, not loose, not shifting, holding. He stood up again, wiping the sole against a rock. Then he turned, not to the tractor, but to Ryan. "You still got pressure in those tires?" Eli asked. Ryan blinked. "What?" The truck, Eli said, nodding toward the rig. "Tire pressure." Ryan frowned slightly. "Yeah, of course we do." "Why?" Eli held his gaze for a moment. "Drop it." A pause, then laughter again. "You want us to deflate a $2 million rig," someone said. Ryan shook his head, smirking. "This isn't a guessing game," he said. "We already. You're holding it down." Eli cut in, not louder, but sharper, just enough to interrupt the rhythm of certainty. Ryan hesitated, not because he agreed, but because for the first time, he didn't immediately dismiss it. "What do you mean?" he asked. Eli nodded toward the tires. "Too much pressure," he said. "You're pushing weight straight down. It's locking the mud around it." Silence just for a second. Then someone scoffed. "That's not how it works." Eli didn't argue. He just looked back at the rig. "Then keep doing what you're doing." That landed differently, because now it wasn't a challenge. It was a choice. Ryan exhaled slowly, looked at the rig, looked at the ground, then back at Eli. How much, he asked. Eli didn't hesitate. 20%. Another pause. Then Ryan turned. "All right," he said. "Drop it." The crew moved in, not convinced, but curious enough. Valves opened. Air hissed out slowly, the massive tires lowering just enough to spread their surface. Eli walked again, this time toward the side of the rig. "Dig here," he said, pointing to a spot just off the rear wheel. A worker hesitated. Ryan nodded. "Do it." Shovels hit mud, not deep, just enough to break the seal, to interrupt the suction. And that was the part nobody had tried, because they had all been focused on pulling harder, not releasing what was holding it. Eli stepped back, finally turning toward his tractor. "But I need to tell you something important here, because what Eli was doing didn't look like strength. It looked like delay, like hesitation, like someone avoiding the real problem. But that was the mistake everyone else had already made. They had tried to overpower the situation. Eli was changing it, because the truth is, nothing that heavy stays stuck because it's too strong to move. It stays stuck because something is holding it in place. And once you understand what that is, you don't need more power. You need the right moment, and that moment was coming." Eli climbed onto the tractor. The seat creaked slightly under his weight. The engine coughed once, then settled into that same low, uneven idle. Not impressive, not intimidating. "Just steady." Ryan stood off to the side now, watching, not laughing anymore, not speaking either, because something about what had already happened didn't feel like a joke anymore. Eli didn't rush. He eased the tractor forward, lining it up at an angle not directly in front of the rig, but slightly off to the side. Ryan noticed that. "Why not straight?" he asked. Eli didn't look at him, because it's not stuck straight. That answer didn't make sense. Not yet, but it stayed with him. Chains were brought in. Heavy, industrial, still coated in mud from the last failed attempt. Eli hooked them differently. Not tight, not rigid, with just enough slack to allow movement before tension. Another thing no one had tried. "Ready," someone called. Eli nodded once, and for a moment, everything went quiet again. Not completely, but enough. Enough that people leaned forward. Enough that no one laughed, because now they were watching. Eli placed his hand on the throttle, didn't push it, just rested it there, feeling the machine, waiting. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. Nothing happened. A man in the back whispered, "What's he waiting for?" But Eli didn't move, because he wasn't watching the rig. He was watching the ground. The slight shift where the tire pressure had changed. The small collapse where the mud had been cut. The subtle release of tension beneath the surface. And then he moved the throttle, just slightly. The tractor leaned forward. The chain tightened. The rig didn't move. A few heads shook. Someone exhaled. "Yeah." No. But Eli didn't increase the power, didn't force it. He held it, steady, low, controlled. And that was when something changed. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. The mud around the rear wheel cracked, a thin line at first, barely visible. Then way there, then deeper. Ryan saw it, took a step forward. Wait, the rig shifted. Not forward, not yet, but up. Just a fraction, enough to break the seal. And that was the moment everything turned, because what happened next wasn't about pulling harder. It was about letting go. The crack spread faster than anyone expected. Not wide, not dramatic, but enough. Enough that the mud, thick, stubborn, almost solid just moments ago began to loosen its grip. The rear tire of the rig shifted again. A slight tilt, a subtle lift, and then movement. At first it didn't look like progress. It looked like the machine was settling deeper. A few men stepped back instinctively. Someone muttered, "It's sinking more." But Eli didn't react, didn't increase the throttle, didn't panic, because he knew what they didn't. The ground wasn't pulling the machine down anymore. It was letting go. The tractor continued forward at the same slow pace. The chain tightened fully now. No slack, no jerking, just steady pressure. And that was when the rig moved. Not an inch, not a foot, but enough. Enough that everyone saw it. Wait, look at that." Voices rose. Boots shifted. Phones came up again. But this time not for laughter. For proof. The rig lurched slightly to one side. Not straight, not aligned, but exactly the way Eli had positioned it, because he wasn't pulling it out. He was pulling it free. The mud released in stages, first the rear, then the side. Then slowly, the entire weight shifted. And once that happened, there was nothing left holding it. The tractor didn't speed up, didn't surge. It just kept going. And the rig, that massive immovable piece of machinery, followed. sliding, dragging, then rolling. Within seconds, what had been impossible became inevitable. By the time it cleared the deepest part of the mud, no one was speaking. Not the workers, not the operators, not even Ryan, because the hardest part to process wasn't what they were seeing. It was what it meant. 90 seconds. That was all it took. After hours of failure, after machines 10 times the size had tried and failed, after every logical solution had been exhausted, an old tractor had done what none of them could. And that was the part nobody forgot. Eli eased off the throttle. The rig rolled to a stop on solid ground. Clean, free, like it had never been stuck at all. The engine idled, low, steady, unchanged. And for a moment, no one moved. Because the entire site, all the noise, all the urgency, all the certainty, had just been replaced by something else. Silence. Heavy, uncomfortable, real. Eli reached down, turned the key. The engine shut off. And just like that, it was over. No celebration, no announcement, no explanation. He stepped down from the tractor, wiped his hands on his jeans, and started walking back the way he came. That was when Ryan spoke. Wait. The word came out slower than he expected. Less confident, less certain. Eli stopped, turned slightly. Ryan walked toward him. Not fast, not slow, just deliberate. Because everything about him had changed in the last 90 seconds. The posture, the tone, the certainty, gone. What did you do? He asked. Not accusing, not challenging, just asking. Eli looked at him for a moment, then back at the ground. Nothing, he said. Ryan frowned. That's not. Eli shook his head slightly. I didn't pull it out, he said. A pause. I let it come out. Ryan didn't respond, because that didn't make sense. Not yet. Eli glanced back at the rig, then at the tracks it left behind. You were holding it in, he said. Ryan followed his gaze. The mud, the shape of the holes, the way the ground had collapsed inward instead of outward. You push straight down, Eli continued. More weight, more pressure, more hold. Silence, and the crane. Ryan asked quietly. Too fast, Eli said. Too much force. Another pause. Then, you don't pull harder, Eli said. You change what's holding it. That was it. No lecture, no explanation, just a sentence. And somehow, that was enough, because standing there, looking at the ground instead of the machine, Ryan finally saw it. Not clearly, not completely, but enough to know he had been solving the wrong problem. Eli turned again, walked back to his tractor, climbed up, and drove away the same way he arrived. Slow, quiet, unnoticed. Except this time, everyone was watching. The video spread within days, not because it was flashy, not because it was loud, but because it didn't make sense. A $2 million rig, multiple failed attempts, and then one old man, one old tractor, and 90 seconds that changed everything. Engineers tried to explain it. Some said it was luck. Some said it was positioning. Some said the previous attempts had loosened it just enough. But the men who had been there, they knew. Because they had seen the difference, not in the machine, but in the approach. Ryan came back a week later. No team, no logo shirt, no audience. Just him. He found Eli out near a small field, the same tractor idling nearby as he worked the soil in long, even passes. Ryan didn't interrupt. He waited until Eli stopped on his own. You were right, Ryan said. Eli wiped his hands, didn't respond. I was trying to overpower it, Ryan continued. I never even looked at what was actually holding it down. Eli nodded once. That's most problems. Ryan exhaled slowly. How did you know, he asked. Eli looked out across the field. At the dirt, the lines, the subtle changes in texture. Most people would never notice. I didn't, he said. Ryan frowned. But you, I've just seen it before. A pause. Different machine, Eli added. Same ground. And that was when it settled. Not just the explanation, but the lesson. Because this story was never really about a tractor, or a rig, or even the mud. It was about the way people think. Some see a problem and try to beat it. More force, more power, more control. And sometimes that works until it doesn't. One man looked at the same problem and asked a different question. Not how to pull harder, but what needed to change so it could move at all. And maybe that's the part worth remembering. Not just out there in a field of clay, but everywhere else too. That strength isn't always the answer. Speed isn't always the solution. And just because something looks too small, too old, too simple, doesn't mean it is. Because sometimes, the man everyone laughs at first is the only one who understands the problem at all.